Welcome to the Dons Podcast.
Here we have Daniela Gustin,
Allison Amasan,
Maria Sears,
and Imani Barrios.
And we are a group of 12th graders in our U.S. government class filming a podcast on the importance of teaching Black history. So let's get right into it.
So why do you guys think it's important to teach Black history?
I believe it's important because it allows students to find their voices and advocate for causes that speak to their interests, especially as Black students.
Also, Black history is just such a vital part of America. You know, like from starting from back a long time ago, if it wasn't for Blacks, America wouldn't be where it is now, you know?
We also want to touch on the duality of Black history, not only focusing on the negative things, but also the positive things, such as the comparison between slavery, but then also accomplishment.
I definitely agree with you guys. And like you said, Imani, I feel like Black history is a really big, important part of American history. So I don't understand why they want to ban it. And I personally didn't really know or pay attention to the importance of Black history. But that's something I'll talk about later. And the fact that I didn't pay attention to that isn't only sad, but it also shows how we barely learn about it, besides the negative topics like slavery. But now that I realize, I think it's really important for it to be taught in schools, since it doesn't only celebrate Black history, but it also allows people from other countries and races to learn about it. So instead of banning it, they should focus on teaching it more. So how much do we really know about Black history, and how have school taught us about Black history?
For one, slavery is the generic topic that's taught about Black history. So we know that starting from when Blacks were taken from Africa, they come to America, help America progress. And then from there, that's what we learn in school. That's the basics. We don't get more into like the accomplishments of everyone and how Blacks contributed so much to America and where it is now today.
And for example, a perfect example would be the civil rights movement, where we're fighting, and what's so crazy is that we're taught to belittle Black people. We were taught that Black people, they're the ones who do all the work. They're the ones who are in the hot sun, sweating. They're the ones getting beat. They're the ones getting used and abused. And that's all we were taught. We weren't taught about how they fought, how we fought for our rights. We fought civil rights, protesting, fighting back and forth. We fought for that, and they do not view us like that. We're always belittled. We're always the one beneath them, and we always come second, not first.
And also, when we do learn about anything positive, the main topic we learn about is the Harlem Renaissance and how music and art influenced Black people, but we don't really touch on much after that, like accomplishments of Black people, which we will get into later on in our podcast.
Also, I just want to share my experience with it. Like, I never really saw the importance of Black history, especially as a white Hispanic. I really never thought about how much they were teaching us. But until I met you guys, I started seeing, the importance and how they don't teach us anything about it except for slavery, like you said, and
it was hurting us in school. Like in class, we would talk about it. We would say our opinions, and sometimes it was kind of like, well, you're right at one point, and then go on and move on to the next conversation. It wasn't like a back and forth conversation amongst all of us. There was other students in the class that also wanted to engage in the conversation with us, but it wasn't an open-ended discussion with everyone.
No, yeah, definitely. And now this podcast is helping me realize, also with the laws, with the news that I've seen about Black history and how they want to ban it, I'm not realizing how important it is.
Here we have two junior high school students, and they go by the names of
Amelie
and Brooke.
Okay, first question is, do you know what critical race theory is?
Yeah, I know that they're trying to ban it in schools and trying to limit the amount of Black representation in history that is taught within schools.
Yeah, I know that they're trying to whitewash all the history.
So how do you feel about the banning of critical race theory in schools?
I definitely think it's a bad thing, because why would you limit anyone's education, especially part of our history that is so important, including giving people their rights, and then trying to take away that part of history that is being taught? I just think it's completely unethical.
So, just to wrap it up, what are your final thoughts about this topic, and do you have any questions for us?
I just think that the banning of the critical race theory is completely absurd. Limiting anyone's education to anything is something that should not be done in schools, a place where people go to learn.
Next, we will define critical race theory. Critical race theory is the set of approaches to understand the history and the present of American society. Critical race theory basically broadens how we think about the past, and it doesn't teach racial unfairness and systemic racism within our institutions. The banning of schools from teaching systemic racism is limiting the foundation and the root of how Black history is seen in America.
So, how do you guys feel about systemic racism being banned in schools?
I feel as though it's a terrible thing because not only white people aren't learning about their privilege in America, but Black people aren't learning that there's racism built into the government and how everything's done. So it broadens the way we learn, and we won't really learn about what we should really learn about. We're getting a sugar-coated version, which is not right.
I agree. I think it's unfair that we're not learning the true history of what really went on. And a lot of times people say that racism, it begins from the government, but in reality, it really begins from home and what kids are being taught. But we're not being taught that, so how would we know how to judge or how to be prejudiced? It's just not fair. So here comes the balance we need in Black history, and we're introducing the topic of teachers and sensitivity and how it really should be taught in schools. All right, so we're going to get right into the 1619 Project, which reframes the country's history by placing the consequences of slavery and the contribution of Black Americans at the very center of our national narrative, which is basically saying that the 1619 Project explains the contributions of Black African Americans, and it says that we built the country. And this is something that they're actually trying to ban in the public school system. So how do you guys feel about that?
I feel as though this project is very important, and implementing it in the school's curriculums is very beneficial for students. So the banning of this would be very bad because, like I said before with the critical race theory, we should not be limiting what children learn in schools. If anything, we should be learning more. And this project was one of the examples of us learning more, and for them to ban it, that's just unacceptable.
It's unfair because we usually focus on, the bad parts, which is something Imani will get into later. But this is one of the great things that it does to Black history. It implements that we had a big role in building this country. And I think that's why it definitely should not be banned. It should be a project that's included in almost every history class.
What's so important about this project and what people are stressing is that it shows the duality of Black history, not only the accomplishments, but also the consequences, which is important and vital to learning about our history.
No, I agree with you guys. I think that project is a very important part of Black history, and the fact that they're trying to silence it is unfair for Black kids, and they're trying to learn about their history, and it's just unfair.
So we have an example. There was a New York teacher singling out African American students and basically casting them as slaves in a mock auction as a part of her social studies lesson in March. Keep in mind, this was a 5th grade class, so they're all very young and probably don't understand how this could be detrimental. So what do we think about this?
So I think this is where the balance comes in, where we need a balance between teaching it. Yes, of course, we said that it's really important to teach Black history, but I think it's a matter of how it's also taught. Like Maria just gave us an example of how a teacher physically had students lay on the ground to portray how slaves were in the boats. I think that's just mentally heavy on such young students. I think there should be a limit to how the projects are being given to kids and what they should be doing to understand Black history. So I think it's just a difference between learning about it and enforcing it physically to students.
Difficult history shouldn't be a thing we really get into, as in physically acting out like mock elections. But I feel that you can always substitute it for something different. Like, instead of having kids act out the Middle Passage, we can watch a documentary about a Middle Passage. We can look up a picture. We can display a picture in front of the class and show them how tight slaves were packed into the ship without actually making them experience that. Because not only is that uncomfortable, but we should learn about things that are uncomfortable, but I think there's a limit, and certain things like that should not be displayed in schools.
Right, it should be a balance.
No, yeah, I feel like she went too far. And there's a million other ways of teaching Black history and history in general. Like, you can watch a documentary, a movie, like you said, Maria, especially if they're little kids. And even if this was high schoolers, this is too much. Like, she could find another way of teaching Black history. Like, I do believe we have to teach kids, especially little kids, about Black history, but this is definitely not the way.
Here we have Miss Robin, a former history teacher from Miami-Dade Public Schools.
So our first question is that we interviewed the high school students here about their personal encounters about learning about Black history in school. So we wanted to ask you, how do you feel about Black history was taught to you during your time in school?
It was very general and very vague. Black history when I was in school was taught primarily in February, probably for a couple days. We might have had a project. And it was the normal players, right? So you get a MLK, a Rosa Parks. There was nothing that was ever very detailed. There was nothing that was very expected.
How do you feel the teaching of Black history has changed over time?
When I was in school, what was more taught was this idea of colorblindness, that, you know, we don't celebrate our differences. We just accept that we are we want to be all the same and our differences don't really matter. But that's not realistic. We would love for that to be the case, but I want to be celebrated for my melanin. It's beautiful, right? Like that's important to me. My history, what I carry in me, what is systemically, structurally part of my DNA coding as a Black woman drives who I am. And honestly, quite frankly, it drives society.
Now we're going to move on to more about like the curriculum in school. So how is the curriculum different from learning it? And then now when you were a teacher, how is it different from teaching it?
Vastly different. Growing up in Shreveport, Louisiana, I had a representative amount of Black teachers. So the curriculum that they could provide to me was more than I was going to get from the history books anyway. And a lot of what I gave to my students when I taught was, you know, those amazing lessons that I got from my parents and the in-depth information.
We know you're a mother. You have kids. We would like to know how do you feel about your kids possibly not being able to learn about Black history in their schools?
It's been pretty devastating. But the place where Florida is right now has my husband and I considering leaving the state. Like it's pretty serious. While I have no fear and I have no reservations, my children will absolutely learn all there is that I can provide to them. Just like I got it from my parents, my kids will get it from me. It's a struggle. It's a struggle to think that I'm going to send my children to school and they're going to not be able to hear the truths. And my kids they are biracial. My husband is white.
So do you believe schools should be censoring speech, preventing students from learning an accurate or comprehensive account of history?
Absolutely not. School is where you have an opportunity to get out whatever it is that you want to get out. School is the place where you are free to make those. And even if you say something that is considered to be offensive, that's the point of school. It's for you to have an opportunity, say something, whether it be wrong, whether it be right, but say it, and then have an opportunity to learn about it. And again, when you know better, you do better. And that's what it is.
It just wraps it up.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time.
So welcome.
And there you have it, guys. That is the end of our podcast. And we thank you for listening. And we hope that you enjoyed the podcast and you understood the importance of teaching Black history. Thank you.
you.